playing default is like, it's like Scooby-Doo, man. You got Shaggy and Scooby, you know, the duo Q, the two stoners are like, we're gonna go B and go frag out, yeah, dude. And then you got, you know, Fred, you know, he's like, I'm gonna go garage and I'm gonna set up a trap. And then you got that one guy who he just can't do it, man. Jinkies. Velma dropping her glasses. It's like, hey, all right, let me come with you. Here's your glasses, man. Here, I'll flash into sight for you. All right. All right, so one of the things I said I wanted to start doing is more like guide type content on my channel. I don't really like kind of what's out there in the Valorant scene, and I don't think it's very like helpful or interesting. Like, I don't really see a lot of like interesting discussion around the game. A majority of like the guide content's like very clickbaity type stuff. So anyway, today I wanted to talk about defaulting. This came up in a couple recent games of mine. I both lost a game to defaulting and won a game by defaulting, so it felt particularly relevant, and I kind of wanted to go over it because everyone may not know what it is, how to do it, what do, right? So let's say you're in like a 5-stack with some people on Discord, or even if you're playing with like, you know, just 4 other random people, right? And you're pushing together onto a site, and you've tried this multiple rounds with guns, without guns, you've tried multiple strats, but you just cannot get it to work. Either the opponent's defense is too strong, or the opponent's just reading you and they've stacked the site you go to every time, or who knows, maybe like your coordination is not there. That's when you should try defaulting. Now, defaulting, you'll hear the word default a couple different ways in game. If someone says plant the spike default or default the bomb, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is defaulting the attack strategy. So defaulting is when you're not committing directly to one place. Instead, what you're doing is you want your team to split up and kind of kind of Scooby-Doo around the map, right? You're gonna split up and you're gonna look for clues. And your goal when doing it is to gain as much map control and information as possible while sacrificing as little as possible and putting yourself under as least risk as possible. Let's say, you know, it doesn't work if you're grouping up, right? So what you should do, try splitting up. Send one person to kind of each route, each lane, right? Usually there's a short and long for each site and a mid. So just send one player to each, right? And your goal is to just very slowly check things out, see what's going on. Only use your resources if you need to. And your goal is to communicate with your teammates and see what's going on the defense side and try and get in their heads, right? So there's a couple things to keep an eye on for. Now, obviously, if these defenders decide to get aggressive and you're just holding an angle and they peek you, you know, that's great. That's awesome. If you can catch someone like being aggressive and get like that early pick, that early start, that's really awesome. That's good for your team. But that's not always what defaulting is about. Sometimes it's just about playing to get the enemy to use their util, right? So maybe you're playing like C long on Haven, or on split you're playing B garage, right? Maybe you smoke off the ultimate orb and you grab the ultimate orb, and then, you know, on the enemy team they're like, oh crap, you know, someone's in B garage, let me smoke it, or let me put a molly here, or if it's a sage, like, oh, let me wall this, right? You'll see that actually on Haven and Split. If they have a sage, if you just put one person mid, a lot of the time the sage will just wall it, and that's $400 down the drain, and you didn't do anything at all except let them know you were there. Sometimes all it takes is just doing one jump in the window and it's like wall. But the goal, right, with that is to reduce their resources while spreading out and gaining map control, so that way when you do find an opening in their defense, it's easier for your team to just push in and take the site, because your opponent will be, you know, working with less resources, right? The abilities in Valorant are extremely important, right? You know, once someone uses their ability, like, it's gone. Like, you only get to buy it during the buy phase, like the first 30 seconds of the round, but for the whole round, like, you don't, I mean, with some small exceptions, you don't get any more, right? This is, you see this really bad with some agents where it's like Omen, he gets one blind, and if you miss that blind, that's it, right? So imagine you're playing default on attack, and I don't know, I'll just use Yoru as an example. You probably won't be playing Yoru, but let's say you make some footsteps, right? And Omen wants to try and catch you off guard on defense, so he uses his blind. Well, it's like, well, that's his one blind, right? And so now if we decide to go push a site, that's one less thing we have to worry about, like trying to take the site. And that's kind of your goal, is to like draw out all the util from the enemy, so it gives them less resources to work with. Now, because your whole team is kind of like split up and divvied up, I will say communication becomes even more important than it like already is. And communication is extremely important, but when you have 5 people all working kind of independently, you might have like 2 people paired up, but it's extremely important to kind of let your team know what's going on, even if it seems like just simple stuff, you know, just like some really useful things to know, or like what util has the enemy team used, where are their players playing, right? If they have a Cypher and a Killjoy and a Sage on B, do you want to go B? No, you don't. That sucks. So it's important, you know, to kind of relay to your teammates like what exactly is like going on. Like, hey, I got a pick here, or hey, they have this person playing here. Oh, this was baited out. Omen used this, or this guy used this, or I'm gonna try and make a play here, you know. Reason I bring this up is because a lot of people seem to either not really understand defaulting, or they kind of play it wrong. I think one thing that a lot of people miss is like when you default and you find an opening, you don't just always want to remain split up. There are some times when it's good to just split up and just take as much map control as possible if you're winning your duels or whatever. But sometimes it's best to like, if you're coordinating, you could find out like, okay, this is the best spot to go. Let's all get back together, put our clues back together, right? And take the site together at the defender's like weakest point. I see some people call defaulting like playing for picks, and you could argue whether that's like the same thing or a different thing. I think most people consider that to be the same thing. I would say it's the same thing done in a different manner. Playing for picks is more of like to me is more of a counter strategy. If you know the opponent on defense, like they all like to push out and be aggressive, then I would say play for picks. Like hold angles and use your util to catch someone that is being aggressive on defense where they don't need to be, right? Whereas defaulting, I think your goal should be more of control and like awareness and creating opportunities in general, whether that be just draining the opponent's resources or actually getting kills, you know. One thing to be wary of while defaulting though is time, and that kind of moves me over to the defense side. What do you do when your opponent is defaulting, right? Well, it's important to understand like what they're looking for, right? They are gambling their time, right? Because they're not just pushing a site. They're deciding to split up and figure out what's going on, trying to, you know, get like the easiest bits of information or util usage or kills that they can, right? While committing as little as possible, right? And what they're gambling is their time, right? So as a defender, well, the simplest solution is just don't give them what they want. I say this to people all the time in games where it's very clear that like the opponent is defaulting every round. They're attacking, we're on defense, and I'm like, the thing I say almost every game is, hey, the opponent is defaulting. What we should do is just wait and chill. The enemy wants a pick. They want a pick. They want a free pick with no committal. Let's not give it to them. And sometimes I'll even be as bold as to say, I think everyone should sit in corners with a shotgun, because there are some teams where that will legitimately work, right? Because you have to remember, when the enemy team is split up, right, they have to kind of be a lot slower and more methodical with how they like check things, right? If one person's pushing and they have to clear a lot of angles, like let's say garage on Haven, right? There's a lot of angles you got to check in there, right? It's not like they can be like, hey, Sky, will you flash this? Omen, will you smoke window while I use a recon dart here and then we'll clear the whole garage? It's like, usually it's one person and they've got to slow peek these angles. Remember, they're usually trying to commit as little as possible to gain as much as possible. So honestly, sometimes sitting in the corner with a shotgun is awesome. Another tactic you can use is just play your life, man. Seriously. If the opponent's looking for a pick and they're looking to bait out someone and get kills, like, or draw out your util or whatever, just wait. Like, just wait and stay alive. Just sometimes it's best to just like sit in the back of sight and just wait. When I notice the opponent is like defaulting and I'm playing Sage, right? The common Sage strat is like, oh, you wall mid at the start of round so they can't push mid, right? One thing I'll do is I notice if I notice they're defaulting, right? On default you're playing a lot slower because you're split, right? One thing I'll do is I won't wall mid right at the start. Instead, I'll wait sometimes 30, 40 seconds into a round, and most of the time at no consequence, because the team is playing slow and playing split and they're trying to slowly work their way through the map. It gives you a lot more time to work with as a defender. And remember, they're looking to find out like where you are. They're trying to make you use your util. They're trying to catch people for free, so just don't let them do that. Don't let them take anything for free, right? Now you can go aggressive against the default. You have to be careful though, and you can't screw it up, right? If you have two people like holding a site and you know they're playing default, you could do some sort of play like with your util to try and catch someone who's out alone, right? But it's usually very risky. You have to remember they are looking for someone to be aggressive, usually, if they're doing it right. I'd say split up and look for clues.